Welcome back to the discussion. Government's Blueprint for Disaster Recovery in the Cloud, sponsored by Commvault and Amazon Web Services, here on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. My guests today are Brian Brockway, the Chief Technology Officer at Commvault, and Dan Kaysen, the Senior Manager of Worldwide Public Sector at Amazon Web Services. And before the break, we were talking about orchestration. And so if you would, Brian, wind up for us where orchestration lives and what are some of the things it can do for you in this multiple cloud environment.
Very good. So orchestration, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of a new concept that cloud allows us to actually use. And it's the how do we form some of the automation steps? How do we tie them together? How do we wrap them around some workflows and basically, to the degree, make it a push-button exercise? So instead of coming in and having a lot of manual tasks and a lot of procedures and taking a lot of time, now we can come in and we can really program a disaster recovery outcome back into the cloud as a great example. And this is, I think, one of the top objectives we see a lot of people jumping into to say, how do I start to take data from on-premise and start to bring it into the cloud for recovery purposes?
And then the other question a lot of agencies have, and I think some have been burned by this, is how do you get data out of the cloud? You can check your data in, but can you get it back when you want to?
And that's a great point, because I think what we've seen in most cases, and it really comes down to your data management strategy. The service that you use to put data into the cloud, if it's an effective one and it can come back in and basically orchestrate in reverse. Can we bring that same data back out, secure it, bring it back on-prem, or bring it off to another cloud location? And it's the nice factor inside there, it's all policy-based. So as you have a policy, a set of retention rules inside there, as we see many in government have these days, you have the flexibility of being able to move your data from location to location without having to send people in trucks and boxes to go off and see if you can move it from point A to point B.
And Dan, what do you hear from federal customers with respect to the two-way nature of data?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's usually less of a concern about being able to get data out because, oh, gosh, I got to get my stuff out of the cloud, and more about effective data management. And how do I, one, provide either better reliability or have options from an archiving standpoint? And that's where Commvault and orchestration really comes into value, because it gives those customers options to meet their requirements, whether it's cost or it's compliance, et cetera. Having those options is important, and having a cloud provider that gives you capability to do that. And the things that typically go into that is does a cloud provider like Amazon Web Services support industry standards for accessing data, for retrieving the data? Do they support the existing systems that you might be running on premises today? Do they have good hybrid services that allow you to put data into and get data out of the cloud, such as AWS has something called data import export. We have a device called a Snowball that you can actually ship to your environment, load your data on and ship it to AWS, and they suck it into the cloud, or vice versa.
And what about the architectures of hardware that might be in the data center of the agency versus what Amazon is offering or Commvault? Is that a factor with these snowballs, or is there some hypervisor type of interface such that the data can be extracted easily?
The answer is both. In many cases, there are built-in tools into the AWS platform that allow you to extract data from different formats into something that can be consumed, imported, exported to the cloud. For other things that are much more comprehensive and complex, solutions like Commvault are exactly for that, where one, they can manage not just pulling data out, but then the orchestration, the data management, it has to happen in a conversion like that. And I want to talk more about that.
Yeah, I think to Dan's point, one of the key things that we've always done through the years is to ensure, can we speak natively? And it's a lot of the work that we've done with the Amazon teams to be able to come in and not only take data in formats that you have in production, let's say virtual machines that running on another hypervisor, and say, can we automatically bring it to the cloud and convert it over and then upload it right into an Amazon workload inside there too. So the native accessibility to be able to bring data two ways is what gives a lot of agencies the flexibility of saying, how do I have choice?
And when you say data, can that also extend to the workload that
Absolutely.
the data is supporting?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, good. And we've been talking about moving to the cloud and the cloud first over these many years. But really for agencies, I think the trend emerging is that it's more than one cloud that they use, multiple cloud. And it could be what they call the hybrid approach, where you have your own, you have a commercial cloud provider, and maybe a multi-tenant situation where different styles of cloud. And so, what are some strategies for addressing the hybrid environment that's emerging?
I'll start with that one. Again, there are a lot of scenarios where you want to make sure that the cloud provider you select gives you options with that. Amazon Web Services, for example, has built-in capabilities for supporting strong hybrid architectures. We have something called Virtual Private Cloud. It allows you to extend your on-premises network just into the cloud. Direct Connect and other things too, and leveraging industry standards too. Again, to make sure that you're supporting the same systems and services that you're using in a premises-based environment. So that's one. The second thing is leveraging strong solution providers that provide capabilities for that, like Commvault, that allow you the capability to have data mobility in a transparent way that is effectively managed and removes a lot of the headaches from people who have to manage it themselves. The one thing I can comment on my side is for organizations that are thinking of a real hybrid cloud strategy, you want to think about that very, very carefully, because there's some overhead that comes with that, whether having multiple skill sets and managing that, whether it's losing some of the efficiencies of scale or economies of scale in procuring your cloud services, to having to deal with lowest common denominator and not being able to take advantage of innovative services that come out. But we recognize that organizations are going to need hybrid environments. There's no way anyone's going to move to one thing entirely, and having good solutions out there like Commvault to support that is critical to any implementation.
And so you need agility for these multiple cloud environments, and that means that it seems like a place where the orchestration and automation, which is not precisely the same thing as orchestration, but they're allied. It seems like that would be a really important factor in the hybrid
Absolutely, because
situation.
I think it's not only the wrapping and the movement, as we talked about earlier, but it's even the notion of things like multi-tenancy. How am I able to carve off different pieces of the architecture, different workloads and data sets, and be able to move them from point A to point B. But I think, as Dan pointed out too, there's a lot of capabilities that Amazon has in the cloud that we utilize, whether it's key management, whether some of the classification and organization structures, the notion of buying, one large bucket and using it across the entire agency is not as easily implemented as it sounds.
And what about I wanted to ask you also about the idea of software as a service that agencies might use, and then you're using the software as a services provider's cloud, which brings maybe another cloud or another environment or facility into this. Can that work in the hybrid situation?
Absolutely. So the one nice nature about software as a service, and effectively, cloud is probably the best example of software as a service, because cloud is running, you get all the resources, compute, data, and everything else you need, but you don't actually know what's the hardware sitting underneath there. And this is a big departure point for many in IT these days, because many decided to build hardware at the bottom first and then kind of move up. Software defined allows you to start at the top, define my workloads, define my software. How do I move and how do I make it portable to be able to span these different locations and use many of the services that Amazon and the hybrid cloud offer you back to your advantages.
All right, we're going to take a short break on that note. Our guests today are Dan Kaysen, the Senior Manager of Worldwide Public Sector at Amazon Web Services, and Brian Brockway, the Chief Technology Officer at Commvault. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. Our discussion is entitled Government's Blueprint for Disaster Recovery in the Cloud, sponsored by Amazon Web Services and Commvault, here on federalnewsradio.com and Federal News Radio 1500 AM.